You had mentioned earlier today, you said, I never thought that I'd say that I'd been climbing for 50 years. What does being someone who's climbed for 50 years mean to you?
Um, I guess it means it's kind of personal in the sense that when I was younger and I was kind of wild and loose and directionless, and I kind of thought I would never live this long, let alone get involved in a sport or anything else that I would pursue for this long. And, I had nothing on the horizon when I was a lot younger. And so as I kind of evolved and learned more about myself, and I started changing my thinking about whether I was going to live to an older age and whether I would stick with something, you know.
You kind of mentioned this earlier today, and you just mentioned it now, about the previous kind of version of yourself, I guess, before you found climbing. Um, like, why don't you take us back to who that was and paint a picture for us of kind of who Patrick was before you found climbing?
Mm. Yeah. Um, to start with, I grew up in the beach area of Los Angeles, Manhattan Beach, to be precise. And um, so as a kid, um, my family was a little bit dysfunctional. Both of my parents were hard workers, but they were also functional alcoholics. And so I spent a lot of the time when I was small out of the house at the beach. As I couldn't wait for school to get out every year and go out on the beach in the summertime. And that was the proverbial be home when the lights, go off. Well, in the summertime, daylight savings, the lights didn't go out until 8:30 at night. So I literally stayed out till 8:30 at night, and so I stayed away from home, excuse me, and just kind of roamed around on the beach, went swimming and so on, and body surfing, and then when I got to be 13, I started surfing, and then that kind of became the focus of my life for about 17 years until I was about 27. And uh, so, but I didn't realize all of that time that I was kind of a loner. I never had that in my mind that I was a loner or that I was adventurous or anything. And then when I was around 27, I had gotten married and moved to bought a house in Long Beach, California. And um, the guy that my wife and I bought the house from lived right next door. He was a realtor and he had a little home office. And shortly after I moved in there, I went next door to his house to talk with him. And he invited me in, and I went in to his little home office, and he had a nice big desk in there, and sat down. And uh, he, uh, he had all this stuff on the wall behind his desk. These colorful things and all these metallic things, which turned out to be hexentrics and nuts and stuff like that. And there were even a few pitons. And there was a hammer, I remember a hammer, and then a bunch of slings. And he had a rope coiled up and all that stuff. So I was sitting there talking with him, but I couldn't get my eyes off of all this junk on his wall. And I said, what is all that stuff? And he said, oh, that's climbing equipment. You want to go climbing? And I thought about it for a minute, and I said, sure, why not, That a couple days later, we left and drove down to Joshua Tree after his work. And it felt like it took us all night to get there, and we ended up somewhere out in the desert in Joshua Tree. And so we got up and we woke up in the morning. We had cooked up some coffee, and this is when Joshua Tree was just dirt roads. It wasn't a monument. It wasn't a park or anything. And so he took me over. We were near this place, which I later found out was called the Bishop's Hat, I think, or something like that, or the Pope's Hat or something. We went around this corner through some corridors of rock and went over to this spot, and he just uncoiled this rope, got this gear out, put it all on, had it all draped on a sling, and he just roped up. He showed me he had another harness he gave me to put on. He showed me how to put the harness on. He tied me into the end of the rope. Although I think back on it now, I didn't really need to be tied in because the climb that we were going to do was probably only 35 or 40 feet. It was Joshua Tree, And, so he started to climb this thing, and he got up about 15 feet and he started struggling. And he says, oh man, I'm really having a hard time. And I'm going to come down. And he kind of down climbed it and took a little tension on the rope. He had showed me how to belay also. And so he comes down and he says, I don't think I can do it. He was hungover, is what the problem was. And he said, do you want to try it? And so then I said, well, I don't know. And he goes, well, yeah, you could probably climb this. And then he showed me how to place a hex. And the whole crack was probably like, 2.5, 3 inches wide. And so he showed me how to place a hex and so on. He gave me the gear and I climbed the thing. And I think I placed 2 pieces in there and got to the top. And it's kind of like, what do I do now? And he said, well, sit down and put the rope around your waist and bring all the rope up and then I'll come up. And so then I gave him a hip belay just sitting there on top of this rock. And he came up to the top and he came up without any problem. And I've often wondered, like, what was he trying to pull, like, what did he want me to do? That he just wanted to see if I could do this or, what was going on. But that was my first climb. And I didn't climb again for several months, but it just got me thinking, and at that time, I had been surfing, I had been building surfboards and boats and doing all this stuff, and all the while I was doing all that, and even when I met my first wife, I was doing drugs and I was doing drinking and drugging all the time, and just, I was a mess. Mm. And somehow I fooled everybody,
Yeah, I mean, you just fooled me, to be honest. I was like hoping to kind of circle back to that previous version of yourself, because so far you've painted this picture of someone who, likes to be outside, you surf, you had a job, you bought a house, you had a wife. Like, these are characteristics of someone who has their life together.
I guess the reason I'm telling you the story in that way, I just kind of went from one thing to another without really being purposeful. Things would come up and I would just go, yeah, okay, I'll try that. It wasn't that I thought, I saw a movie or something and thought, wow, I might like to do that. And then go and look to do it, and I was just like, whatever came up, then I might go in that direction. or am I going this direction? And so I had no plan, Even when I got married, it was like almost a surprise to me. Like, oh, I'm doing this, like, okay, well, I guess because my, uh, I don't really remember why I decided to get married, It was just
Guess it's
maybe
about
my
time, right?
ex-wife said something to me, like we should be married or something. I don't even know. But so I was this pretty directionless, pretty just kind of off the cuff. If the wind blows this direction, blows me in that direction, I'll go that direction kind of a person. And then this one thing happened where I was invited to go climbing, and that it seemed like, or it felt like, that one experience of going down to Joshua Tree and climbing for that one day maybe clicked the switch in my brain. And I decided that I would get out of LA and go up to, I had an opportunity to go up to Oregon and work for a friend of mine in construction. And I decided I would do that.
It's a huge life change.
Yeah, just because he said, why don't you come up here and work for me, So I moved up to Oregon with my friend Brad, and he was building and remodeling up there, and it was Pine, Oregon. I went up there and started working for him, and pretty much that was it. I just stayed away from drugs or anything else,
So you changed careers. You left your ex-wife?
Yeah, well, actually, she left me first, but...
Okay. But this is all like surrounding the event of you finding climbing.
Yeah.
How, like, what's the time frame here? Like months? A year?
Oh, no, I moved to Oregon probably, maybe 4 or 5 months after that experience. I had a job. I was working for this guy named Mike Williamson, building some houses up in Palos Verdes, but, still conducting my debauchy life on the side. And that was probably one of the problems, is that my wife really didn't know what I was up to most of the time. So, but at any rate, I went up to Oregon, and I stayed pretty relatively sane. And, while I was up there, I would hear about people I knew in Manhattan and Hermosa Beach who had died or things like that.
From from the lifestyle that you had been living in. Yeah.
Uh-huh. And so I would go, wow, this was a good decision, And I was up there for about 1.5 years with Brad, and then I got a call from my father. And, well, during the time that I was up there, I actually met this woman who worked for the Forest Service who had some climbing experience. And we went climbing, I think, 2 times while I was up there, which was really fun, really cool. And that was just another discovery, right? I was like, I'm talking to this person, and she says, oh, yeah. I was telling her about my first climbing experience. She says, oh, yeah, I've climbed before. I have some gear, I have some equipment. So we went climbing. But
What do you think about the sport was like? Because I hear your origin story, and I mean, it doesn't sound like that crazy, right? It wasn't like this intense experience, or it kind of seemed lachrymose almost in a way. So like, what about that experience? What about the sport of climbing, like, caused such a shift in your life? Like, was there something about the sport that did that?
yeah, I think so. I think there was sort of a realization that I had been challenged to do something that initially I thought might be impossible. And the few times that I climbed, once in Joshua Tree and a couple times in Oregon, in each case, I led the climbs. I had no idea that was not something that people did. You know, most people, when they start climbing, they follow, and nowadays they go to a gym, you know, and they learn that way. And yet, so I really didn't have any idea about what I was doing, but I did understand that I was accomplishing something that I would have ordinarily thought was impossible. And so I just got more and more motivated with each climb to do more and find other climbers. I had landed in an amazing rock climbing area. There was Dome Rock, the Needles, Hermit Spire, this place called Trilogy Rock. There were all these rock formations all the way down the Kern Canyon into Kernville. And and people were coming up there climbing from LA and Southern California, and they were pioneering there. You know, they were putting up new routes. This was a place in development. I had no idea what that was about. And then I met Richard Leversey, and he was a resident climber up there. He lived in Camp Nelson. He was 10 years my junior, and he already had all this experience climbing El Cap routes and putting up new routes around the Needles and Dome Rock. And he was a very experienced, very exuberant, very adventuresome climber. And so we started climbing together, and I ended up, he needed a roommate, and I moved into his cabin with him in Camp Nelson. It was actually his parents' cabin. And we ended up climbing together pretty regularly for the next couple of years until he moved away and went to college. But he went to college with the idea of becoming an English teacher, which eventually he turned around and said, no, thanks, I don't want to do that. And he went to work for a Chenard equipment company.
Oh, wow.
But so Richard taught me a whole bunch of stuff on like techniques and how to handle ropes and equipment and safe knots and safe knot tying and, you know, all about all the equipment and all this stuff. I think I told you earlier that he literally came out with these 3 books and handed them to me and said, here, read these. You know, one was big wall climbing, and I'm having a blank on which the other 2 were, which I read most of them. And because it was important to Richard that people knew something about history of climbing, the evolution of climbing. He just thought that was what you needed to know to really get into it and really understand it and so on. So,
do you share that philosophy as well?
Yeah.
What do you think about like history that leads to like making someone a better climber, or like where's the value there if someone is like getting into the sport listening to this? Like,
Yeah.
What's the value there?
I think the value is somewhat understanding, well, for example, how important the gear is that you have, and how people who climbed before you didn't have that gear. They had more rudimentary things, you know, even to the point of like learning about the first ascent of the nose, you know, and finding out that these guys were using manila ropes, and they were trying to figure out a way to climb this one wide crack on the thing safely. And somebody said, let's take the legs off of that stove. They'll fit in that crack. They're just like pitons. Let's use them. And they did it, and it's forever called the stove legs crack.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that backhistory on that.
It's the innovation, I guess. And maybe also, I think Richard wanted me to read that kind of stuff just to learn about the spirit, the spirit that seems to be carried along in all these pioneers. That's the same for exploration, accomplishment, the thrill of adventure, and, maybe personal growth. I don't know.
What role does risk play in climbing for you, or did it play in climbing for you?
I don't know what the percentage is, but I think risk should be part of climbing. Maybe because if there's some risk involved, it really enhances your concentration, and it really pushes you to work hard to accomplish your goal. I think without risk of any kind, and or any without some measure of fear or anxiety, that it's too easy to just back off. If you, oh gosh, this is really hard, I don't think I'll do it, or oh, this is really scary, I think I'll go home, that kind of thing. And not you. I think without a little bit of that kind of pushing you to figure it out, it's too easy to say, I'm going to leave and go kayak.
I think there's certain kind of climbers that are just risk averse and wouldn't even put themselves in that situation in the first place.
Yeah.
And then there's other climbers, I think, that find value in the risk that climbing can provide.
Yeah.
And like I talked about today, I think that you said it, like, enhances concentration. I think that it to live in a space or to operate in a space with real consequences for your actions, that's life, that's living.
Yeah.
It's like, how more visceral can you get, or where your decisions matter? It's like, you can walk out the door, and if you trip, it's like, oh, whatever, it doesn't matter. You don't need to pay attention because you can make errors. And I think that, climbing provides that in such a real, visceral way, where if you don't do it right, in some situations, you will die. Yeah. And I love that black and white reality. It's just like, there's no like, oh, but I want to cheat, or I want to get away with it, or I want to not have to pay attention. It's like, okay, then you're going to die. Mm-hmm. It's just like so black and white. I just like, it's so easy. There's no arguing. There's no justifying it. It's just like, that is what it is. I think the one interesting thing that I've run into recently is that people don't understand the value in that in the first place. They're like, why would you risk your life? For what? Right?
Yeah.
Like,
or why would you risk injury?
Why would you even risk injury?
Yeah.
Like, what's the purpose? Why? I think someone painted the analogy, like, people going to war, risking life. That's for a higher purpose, right? That's for the protection of your country. That's for some greater good. People in the back in the day that were blowing up mines and risking going underground, that was for the betterment of the economy. That was for the acquisition of resources. Climbing doesn't have any of that. There is no higher power or higher justification for the reason that we put our lives in risk. And so it's like, it's kind of a hard question to answer, because in the end, I think climbing is kind of a selfish pursuit in that way. Because if you die, and people get to clean up your mess, and your family's hurt, and friends that loved you have to grieve your loss. And so, when you think about it in that light, like, what's the justification for risk, and what's the justification for and I'm not immune to this. I climb I don't solo, but I definitely put myself in no fall zones. I love operating in that space. So I'm just curious what your um, reasoning or justification for operating in what most people might call purposeless risk. Like why? Why is it something that's valuable to you?
Yeah. Um, well, the other part of that, I think, is, especially for me, I'm telling you about my past. I think that era of my life where I was using drugs and alcohol and, being intoxicated or whatever, and just kind of listless and almost hiding out, right? Well, like when I was in high school, I was really shy. I was one of those kids that if I could have just stayed in my locker all day and smoked
Inside your
cigarettes,
locker, yeah.
yeah, and smoke cigarettes, I probably would have been fine. Instead, I ditched school and went surfing, but I was not confident about anything. I was shy. I was uncertain about myself and my relationships with other people. I was always kind of guarded and fearful of interactions with people, and I didn't have any self-confidence. And that kind of pursued me all the way up until I started climbing. And then started to change my mindset. And risk was part of that changing of mindset. Taking risks and finding out that I could do something that was risky and accomplish it. Fulfill whatever idea I had, get to the top without being harmed, without being thrown off or turned back or, and just facing those risks and dealing with them and getting past them.
It's like like a sense of empowerment.
Yeah, exactly. Because a lot of times, certainly fear, I think, makes sense to people. Like, oh, I probably shouldn't drive this, even though the speedometer says 120 miles an hour, I probably shouldn't try to take this vehicle up to that speed because something bad will probably happen, And so there's a lot of logic in not wanting to take risks, but
Well, yeah, self-preservation is built into our biology.
yeah.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think I discovered that I need to take risks. Otherwise, I'm not going to grow. I'm not going to change. I'm not going to become whatever it is I want to become.
Well, I think that's kind of like you had mentioned where you didn't really have like a sense of purpose or direction. You didn't know who it was going to be. And it almost sounds like climbing gave you that thought process of like, wow, I can actually like take control and shape who I want to be. Yeah.
Yeah, I think up to that point, I didn't really have a persona, I had no image of who I was as somebody who could make decisions, accomplish things, make plans, and have goals and achieve them. I had none of that stuff in the context of who I was.
So I'm interested in the difference between like setting goals and achieving goals versus having purpose. Do you see those as synonymous? How do you think about those two concepts?
I clearly remember a day when I was climbing on Dome Rock. We had finished this route, and it was challenging, and some reason I had an image of this idea of goal setting, and that when you set a goal, like getting to the top, there are all these steps that you have to make along the way. And in order to achieve a goal, you have to figure out what what are the steps that you have to take? What are the moves that you have to make? And you keep getting to maybe a move that you didn't anticipate in the overall scheme of things of getting to the top, and then you got to figure out how to make that move, or how to take that step. And it was at that point I kind of realized I never understood this before. So that's why I don't own a house. That's why I don't own a car. That's why I don't own this or that or the other thing, or why I don't have this kind of a job or that kind of a job or whatever, because I just didn't really have an image of how to set a goal and take the steps necessary to achieve it until that one day when I really thought about it,
It's so interesting how climbing can teach us things in the context of climbing, but then it can be extrapolated into our daily life in so many different ways. And like, this is such a perfect example of it. I actually haven't heard of it in this specific light. But I just love the lessons in climbing can be applied to our normal life in so many ways.
Yes.
Yeah.
It can. There are other sports and other things I'm sure you can learn the same lessons in, but this happens to be climbing is the one that I fell into.
I think the one thing that's cool about climbing is it has the characteristics of a sport, right? The training, the nutrition, the fitness, but then it has the element of risk. And so there's that whole other ball of wax that you have to deal with. Then you've got land navigation. And so you have to be aware of your surroundings. You have to problem solve. You have to orient yourself. And so there's all these layers of all these layers that you have to be skilled in. And it's like, there's so many opportunities for growth and learning. And you have to be like kind of a well-rounded individual to be like a outdoorsman, traditional rock climber, climbing like multi-pitch trad lines with like complicated route finding and hiking approaches and learning the systems and the beta and like where to be, how to be safe, how to get yourself out. Like,
right.
It's a lot. It's a lot.
You have to learn all that self-rescue and everything.
Yeah. And I think that the way I've been putting it is like, to be a climber like that, it's not just a sport, it becomes a lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, you have to live your life like that.
Yeah. And a persona, you when you look at yourself in the mirror, you see a climber. Yeah. And it's kind of amazing sometimes.
Absolutely. No, I mean, with this podcast and with the content that I create, I mean, it's all centered around climbing. And so I do worry sometimes. I've already gone through one injury, so I try to climb extremely safe. As I'm sure you saw, hopefully you saw today with probably the 26 camps that I placed in the 115 feet of climbing today. But it's so funny, like this is a quick tangent, but like people are like, well, run it out. And it's like, I like trad climbing because I get to place gear. Yeah. It's like, I don't want to, if I have to place more, I'm not going to complain about it. Let's be real for a second. The blueprint for a successful climbing podcast is simple. Interview the most famous climbers in the world. Big names mean big followings, lots of SEO power, and a built-in audience that helps promote every episode. But this show has never been about that. From the beginning, it has been my mission to bring you stories from the climbing majority. The climbers who don't live in the limelight. The ones who quietly put up routes, build communities, and help give back in ways that are rarely recognized. And while that's what makes this show special, it also means we have an uphill battle when it comes to growth. And that is where you come in. If you believe in the show, if you've been fired up, inspired by an episode, word of mouth is the single most powerful way to help the show. Share an episode with a friend. Post about us on social media, jump onto Reddit threads and Mountain Project forums, and tell people what you've been listening to. Also, I am on a mission to beat Climbing Gold's Spotify review count. If you haven't already left this show a review, please head on over to Spotify to give this show 5 stars. We only have 1,000 more ratings to go. You had mentioned a little bit about I think it was Richard was your mentor. You had mentioned that you ran into Randy Levitt, Tony Yaniro, Lynn Hill. Talk to me about your run-ins with these iconic people.
Those were also really positive experiences. You know, there was a part of me that was very naive when I was, for probably the first 10 or 15 years that I was climbing, really, because in a way, you know, I lived near the Needles. I lived near Dome Rock, and there were all these terrific climbing places, which is absolutely the extent of my climbing history, really. Most of my climbing was done just in the Southern Sierra. And I rarely ever ventured out from that. I would go to Joshua Tree sometimes, usually go to Yosemite and Tuolumne once a year and so on, but generally all the rest of the time I spent there. And I was meeting people, Randy Levitt, Tony Yaniro, Herb Legger, Eddie Joe, gosh, the list goes on and on. Lynn Hill, Mariah Craner, Johnny Woodward. I have a long list of people I met. Some of them I got to climb with. And what I wasn't really thinking about at the time was that I was climbing with the most advanced, most notable climbers in California.
And they already had gotten that kind of namesake for themselves at this point. Yeah.
They were locally famous, you know, but I really didn't know that. I was just meeting people out there and talking with them and stuff. And, you know, like Tony goes, well, hey, we're working on this route over here. You want to go? And it's like, yeah, sure. But I didn't know how extensive his sort of legend was, you know, or Randy's, and then I would hear about things like, oh yeah, well, you know, yeah, Lynn Hill, she's climbed in Yosemite a bunch, and she used to climb with John Long, and, you know, all these guys, all these famous, to me, people from Yosemite, you know. And I was like, wow, well, she's really nice. You know, I would expect her to go, get away from me. Like, don't bother me. But all these people were nice people too. And then another thing is, what used to just blow my mind is the variety of backgrounds that all these people had. You know, like Herb Legger was a laser physicist. Greg Vernon, who I climbed with, he was a chemical physicist. I mean, these are brainy people, you know. Tony Yaniro became a doctor.
Randy Levitt, a real estate guru.
Right, real estate, yeah, guru. Right, and so also so multifaceted, you know. All the things that they had done or were doing, you know, or their occupations, or.
And so that's such an interesting point, actually. I think that like that fact right there, that these icons, these legends had such multifaceted careers, lives, you know, skill sets in so many different areas. It's not really painted in the history books or the history of media. It's not what you hear about. Why do you think like the dirtbag culture these days is so popular? If these icons didn't live that life, you know, like you hear about the Stone Masters and you hear about people like Fred Beckey, who is like the most iconic dirtbag that could possibly exist. Like those people get glorified for their dirtbagness, but like having a career, being a physicist and a climber and you know, pursuing both these things, like that narrative isn't really shared or popular, at least to my knowledge. Like,
right.
Why do you think that?
You don't think too much about, or you don't hear much about how they're making a living.
Yeah, exactly. You assume that they just climb full time.
Right.
Yeah.
And certainly Fred did. But he still wrote multiple books, guidebooks and stuff, and he did lectures and tours and teaching and a bunch of things. But yeah, people don't often know that about him. So that aspect of it, though, was always surprising to me, like, because I was the same way. I would meet these people climbing, and all I would think about was the climbing, And then at some point around a campfire or something, I would find out, or I would ask, what do you do? How do you make a buck? And it's like, well, I'm working on a space program, or it's like that. And it's like, really? That's what you do? Yeah, I'm a scientist, or I do this or that. And I would just go, God, you are such a dumbo, I think to myself, you never think about that.
Yeah. Why do you think dirtbag culture is so glorified these days?
The dirtbag culture, because I think it's a romanticism kind of a thing, being that it's like the rugged individualism of which is the American persona, right? Everybody in America is a rugged individual, They're not, but that's
Especially
that's what the
nowadays.
storybooks, portend, and so that may be a lot of it.
I think it's a disservice to the culture, though. Yeah, I mean, I grew up under the illusion that like you could be a sponsored climber pretty, not easily, but like even the pros these days, like usually have some other thing going on. It's very, at least to my knowledge, it's very rare for someone to just be like fully sponsored and don't do anything else. But I think at least for me in the beginning, it was glorified in that way where I was just like, oh man, climbing can be everything. But I think that, yeah, having that multifaceted life has been so beneficial for me. And I hope to, anybody listening is just like, yeah, there's other things to do besides climbing, and you can still be prolific if you want to.
Yeah, there is. And, I don't really know this, but it seems like there are probably a lot of people climbing right now who never ask questions. You know what I mean? They meet somebody, they start climbing with them and everything, and they probably don't find out much about them.
It's just climbing talk.
Just climbing talk. Yeah.
That's a pet peeve of mine.
And certainly when you're out climbing with people, it's hard not to do that. But it's been my experience that a lot of the people I've met in life, I'm kind of an inquisitor, right? I'll ask people questions. What do you do to make money? Or do you have any kids? Or have you ever been married? Or, where did you go to school? Or things like that. But there aren't many people I've ever met that ask me those kind of questions. At least, yeah, it's been my experience that not that many people want to know about you.
Yeah, and I think it's probably less personal like that, where it's not like it's not the fact that they don't want to know about you. It's that they're so wrapped up in their own mind and their own perception of the world that they don't even think to ask. They're probably worried about, what does he think of me? Oh, I'm not climbing hard enough, or I'm focused on the gear. I'm focused on climbing. Like it's just, there's no room to even have that kind of reflection to connect with somebody else in that way.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the kind of a curse of being a human being, because we have this dialogue going on in our head, or it's actually a monologue, I guess. But it is a way, it's a dialogue with ourselves. We ask questions, we answer questions, we say things, and then we talk about what we just said in our head. God, that was really dumb. Why did I say that? Or whatever it is. And it's hard to turn that off and turn your attention to somebody else. I've always had a hard time listening to people.
Depends on the person.
There's so much conversation going on in my head.
Yeah. I heard something from, I think it was a therapist or something recently that said it's important when you are trying to do self work that you refer to yourself as you and not I. Having that second person, there's something about it that allows you to like disassociate like your mind and your heart. And so like when you talk to yourself as you, it has more of an impact and change than when you say I, because I is here and you is here.
Uh-huh.
And I just thought that was a cool reflection.
That's interesting that you should say that, because I've been trying to learn how to fly fish for the last 4 or 5 years. And it's funny because I often like, I'll have some kind of a problem when I'm fishing or whatever. And I'll go, what is wrong with you? Yeah. Why can't you just figure out how to cast for a change and get that line out in the water instead of back in the bushes? You've done this a million times. But same thing, I'm talking to myself in the second person. And I don't ever remember doing that before I started fly fishing. That's weird.
You're connecting with yourself out there in the water. That's great. Yeah. Circling back to these kind of iconic people, you had said that like people like that challenged you to be a better climber. Like, what does that actually mean? Like, what were they doing? What about you did you feel like you were holding yourself back from that these people inspired you to push yourself on?
Well, they challenged me because in the sense that most of these people were much better, more efficient, more capable climbers than I was.
And that was just like visibly apparent just by watching them
Yes.
climb the routes they were doing.
Oh my God, I would watch people do stuff that was just insane, you know. And I think, like I used to joke, like I would see Tony Yaniro, for example, he'd like grab a hold of a little tiny arete that was just wide, you know, it's like full, like grab it with his hand like that. And he'd just grab it and just pull himself up, you know. And then after he'd be up there a ways, I'd go over and I'd put my hand on it and I go, what how did he do that? You know?
Yeah, he was hella strong.
Yeah, he was. I think he still is, probably. I went and visited with him a couple of years ago in the gym that he has down in Arizona, and he actually remembered me, which was kind of cool.
Yeah, that's awesome.
But I would watch these people do things, and it would just blow me away. You know, climb a roof crack. There's one at the Needles it just goes straight out for about 25 feet, and then you just have to reach around and reach up and grab. I could never do that. There were finger locks, single finger locks and stuff in this crack. And I would watch Mike Leklinski or Tony Yaniro or, you know, a few of these people, and they were all hanging out together and doing this crack, you know. Then somebody says, "Hey, Patrick, you want to try this?" No, no, I don't. And then I would go, oh, okay, you know, but I was really self-conscious. And then I'd go out, I'd get partway out at the thing, and I would just be out of gas, you know. All I could think of was, how did they do that? But so the way that they inspired me to work harder and try harder was stuff like that. People would say, "You want to go climb this? You want to go climb that?" Well, I would know, oh, that's a 511, and there's quite a few moves of 511 on it. Well, I hadn't really climbed much 511, but I would just go, okay, and then I'd be stuck, right? I was having to do that and having to climb it, and I would just kind of have to push myself. And like the one route I told you about, Peg Leg, which is a really great route there at the Needles. I climbed that with this guy named Rob Raker, and he kind of coached me on it. It's a 511. We went up there and so we're roping up and everything, and he goes, "So you gonna lead?" And it was
Doesn't
like,
sound like a question.
"Oh no, he's asking me if I'm gonna lead," and so he went, "Mm, okay," you know, and so I start up the thing, and it's basically it's kind of a lie back off of a corner. It's the same move over and over and over again. And that's why it's called peg leg, because you're kind of stemming out with your right leg, and your toe is on the inside of this corner, and you just kind of move your foot up, and then move this foot up, and move your hand up on the corner, and you just do that move over and over and over again, and this thing just kind of barely arches its way up for a full pitch. And it's a great climb when you do it and you go, I did that, you know. But it's just a fun climb also. But so he was just coaching me on up it. And by the time I got more than halfway up, I'd already done several 511 moves. But he really said, this is how you do it. You put your foot here, you put your foot there, you have your hand on this corner, and you just kind of make this move over and over again. And I did that, and it didn't seem that hard. So it was like amazing, you know. That's what I think talking about is stuff like that, where much better climbers than I would coax me, you know, and coach me and say, well, hey, look, did you think about using that hold over there? You know, reach up a little bit higher. There's a much better hold right there, and do that. And so it was always a great experience, you know.
And so it's such a difference between like watching someone climb something hard, and like, sure, that's inspiring because you're like, wow, it's possible. Then there's like this second layer, which I think is even more important, which is like you said, hey, you want to lead this pitch? Or, hey, I think you can lead this pitch. Yeah. Someone's saying that to you. You know, it's like having someone else who you know climbs hard, whether they know they climb hard, whether they know you can do it or not, having someone just say like, hey, you can do this, or hey, you want to do this. It's so empowering. And I think that's like, so it's something that's really nice for someone to do for somebody else. I had a kid, Joey, he, you know, I had reached out to him on Instagram. I was like, man, Rainbow Wall looks so cool. And he's just like, oh man, you got it. The kid doesn't know me, you know, he doesn't know who I am. He's like, you got it. And I was like, like lol, you know, I don't think I can do it. But anyway, like I started climbing with him a little bit, and he just kept reinforcing it. He's like, no, you can do it. Like, let's go up there and do it. And yeah, I mean, it just like, I went out and climbed the Rainbow Wall, and I followed him the whole route. And that experience just like opened my mind to like what was possible for me. Like I was having this like limiting belief, just like that route is reserved for good climbers. It's reserved for this like tier of climbers that I'm not a part of. Yeah. And having someone just be like, no, dude, you could do it. Normalizing it almost is just so powerful. And so it's cool that you had people to do that for you. I think it's really important as a progression of a climber to have people have belief in you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it always was. And one person that really inspired me was this Mari Gingery, or Gingery. I can't remember how you pronounce her last name, but she's a very well-known Southern California climber. But one time I was down in Joshua Tree, and we were at Hidden Valley Campground, and I just happened to pass by, and I had met her at the Needles, her and her boyfriend, Mike Klinsky, who I think they're married now, but I don't know. But she had a chalk bag on and some climbing shoes on, and she was just kind of walking out of this campsite. And I said, hi, Mari. And she said, hi. She said, and she just goes, you want to go do some bouldering? And I went, yeah, okay. You know, so and I was never very interested in bouldering. Every kind of bouldering experience I had had up to that point, I got injured somehow. You know, I fell off of something, I jumped down from something, I pulled a tendon in my finger or something. Yeah. Bouldering was never a good experience for me, but she took me out and did the same thing, you know, like she would do a problem and then she'd go, it's pretty hard, but you know, just put your left hand right here, make sure you get this foothold for your right foot. There's a little bit of a dyno to get to that. And so I ended up doing several boulder problems, didn't get hurt, had to jump down a couple times, but you know, I was really grateful to her for just taking me out and showing me some stuff, you know.
Yeah. It's cool to have someone who's able to see the rock in a different way. It's so interesting how one person can look at a rock and it's the same rock, but someone sees it in a completely different way than another person. Yeah, it's just experience.
Exactly. Their vision is just slightly different than yours.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You've done some first ascents. I think we talked about like 24, you would say.
I think you asked me about first ascents before, and so I went through guidebooks and stuff and counted them all up. It was more like there's around 54,
Wow,
56
cool. Very cool.
first ascents on the Southern Sierra.
Yeah. Let's talk about some of them. You know, I have a couple here. I don't know if we have time for all of them, but I've got like Homer's Nose, Silver Lining, Here's to Mrs. Robinson. Some of the stuff on Dome Rock, I think we've talked about a couple. Which one would you be interested in diving into first in terms of like telling the story? Something that's kind of memorable for you?
Homer's Nose would be a good one to talk about, I think.
Let's do it.
That was Richard Leversey and I, and he had already done a route there with some other guys. Was at that time the only route up there. You can see Homer's Nose from the Central Valley quite clearly on a good day. Otherwise, you can't see it, but it's the top of a mountain and it's a giant dome. And so we go down to the base of Homer's Nose and we come to this big arête, big corner. It's like a giant exfoliated flake that's just kind of leaning against the rock. And so I just said, this is it. This is where we're going to climb. Looking up at this thing, okay, you know, this looks pretty good. It's got a crack that kind of opens and closes going up. And so Richard says, you want to lead? And I go, oh, okay, you know, so I led the first pitch, and it was a long pitch. And I had a bunch of big hexes and stuff and big nuts. And I think, you know, thinking back on it, Richard had looked at this crack before, so he really knew what to bring for that. So I was placing hexes and climbing and placing hexes. And I think that maybe the hardest move on it was, I don't know, maybe 5'10" or something. Probably a lot of 5'9" and 5'8" kind of moves and stuff. But so I get up to a point where I'm at the end of the rope and set up a belay. And so then I'm bringing Richard up, and like the first piece that he comes to, I see him pull the hammer out of his hammer loop. And he's been working on this thing, trying to get it out. And then he finally sticks the hammer in there, tuck, 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 and taps it out. And I'm thinking, I didn't think that was such a solid placement that he would have to tap it out with a hammer. He couldn't even yank it out, you know. He gets to the next piece and he's yanking on it, trying to pull it up and all this. Same thing. He pulls the hammer out again and he's tapping it out of there. And it's like deforming the piece, you know. And so he does that on another one, and then another one. And he finally gets up to the top, and he goes, man, he says, this flake's got to be moving. that's why these things are working themselves down in there so tight. That's the only thing I can think of. This whole formation is just expanding out, and yeah, just from us climbing on it. It's like, wow, Well, we got to the top of that, and then we did some more pitches, which I frankly can't even remember. He led another one, I led another one. And then as we were climbing, though, all these clouds were coming in. And so what started out as a clear day turned into completely cloud-covered sky, pretty dark clouds. And we were up kind of pretty close to the top, maybe pitch and a half or 2 pitches from the top, and it started to rain. And the last pitch that we did, we were able to climb pretty quickly because the dome was kind of arching over a little bit more. But then we got to a point, it was raining hard enough, there was so much water coming down, we couldn't really climb. Our shoes were so slick, And so Richard says, take your shoes off, take your socks off, put your socks over your shoes for traction. Okay. And then he gets the bolt kit out, and we're at a point where it's like sketchy moves, with all this water coming down. And so we ended up drilling a couple of bolts, and just climbing was like, the whole time it was like you had to pad your hands down. You had to be really careful every step, try and get some traction because it was just so wet and just steep enough that if you didn't do all that, you were just going to be gone,
Did the sock trick work?
It did.
It helped. That's some good beta.
It helped with the traction. Yeah. So we climbed with our socks outside of our shoes for the last pitch. And, the degree kind of laid off, and it got a little easier and easier. So we ended up placing 2 bolts on that. And so then the climb got rated, I think it was 510 something and A1 because of the bolts. And
I thought you were going to say because of the socks.
No. Well, that too. but yeah, we were like, we would place those bolts and then we would pull off of them, and then step on top of them and get up higher. But it was just a short section, but it was still A1 in those conditions. So, and then like within days, we went up to the Needles and we started this route, which we initially named, it was to the left of White Punks on Dope. And Richard wanted to call it Black Dudes on Welfare, which we have changed the name of it. We named it The Voodoo That We Do.
Nice.
But the route was cracked, climbing most of the way up, and it starts out in a wide crack, and then the crack's narrow, and then it got into sort of an alcove, almost like a crotch, and then there was face climbing right up the middle of that. And it was my turn to lead, and I had the bolt kit on, and I climbed up, probably maybe 30 or 40 feet, and the climbing wasn't too hard. And then all of a sudden it went from climbing on face like this to climbing on face like that. And there was sort of a corner, I remember, over on the left side, because this whole area was kind of narrowing like that as I got up there. So here I got myself way out on the rope, and it got harder. And I found that I could stem my foot over against this face on this side, and I had a little tiny foothold for my right foot over here. And there I was, kind of balancing and getting the hammer out, getting the drill out, and I started drilling. That was my first drill on lead. And it was really strenuous. I was just aching the whole time. And, you know, when Richard had drilled this bolt, started it to demonstrate, and then I finished the demonstration bolt, learning how. It was a fairly soft granite, actually. It was like a boulder, you know. It's like, okay, done. Blow it out. Then, you know, ding, 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 1/4-inch bolt goes in with a little leaper hanger or something. And so when I get up there, it's like this. My hands are all the way up here, and I'm going tink, 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 tink. Tink, 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 tink. Tink, 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 tink. The damn drill is not going in. And I was tapping away on that thing for like 40 minutes, it seemed like. Standing there with my one toe over here and my foot flat against this side. And finally, I don't know that it was actually 40 minutes of drilling, but it seemed like it. And I was just blown, exhausted, you know. I got the bolt out, and it already had a hanger on it. There's a button head bolt, and I put it up there, and I did not blow the hole out. So I pounded this bolt in, and it ended up that this little button head was sticking up about 1/16 of an inch above the hanger, and the hanger was a spinner. You know, it was good enough, but it should have been better. And yeah, but I just didn't take the time to blow this stupid hole out because I was exhausted, you know. And so then got that in, clipped the bolt, and it was like, oh, thank God. And then as soon as I clipped the bolt, it felt like I was on a good stance.
Yeah.
It was like psychology, right? It was horrible while I was drilling. It was great after. It was not bad at all after I got clipped into something.
Well, I mean, if you're there for 40 minutes, it's got to be a decent stance.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's funny.
So then we went past that and got up to this big ledge, and then we wrapped off. That was my first bolt drilling experience. And to be honest, I don't think we ever really finished the climb. It seems like there was part of that head wall that you come to when you do white punks. It kind of gets a little lower in height and stuff, but that was still right there. We never really went over the top of it. We just rappelled off the base of a oak tree or something and went back to our gear. But that was another example of kind of the adventure that I had with Richard.
Before we get back to it, if you've been listening to the show, you probably know how much time and effort and love I put into this project. The research, the conversations, the production, the editing, all of it. And while it might seem like I've got a team of people on this project, I don't. It's just me. And even with sponsors, I spend a large amount of my own personal money on this project, simply because I love it. If you're a listener that's looking for a way to give back to the show in a meaningful way, please become a Patreon subscriber. Once you become a supporting member of the Climbing Majority, not only will you feel really good about yourself, but you'll also get access to the ad-free version of the show and exclusive content. If this speaks to you, click the link in the description or go to patreon.com/theclimbingmajoritypodcast to become a supporting member of the show today. What about the earthquake?
The earthquake? Oh my God, that was up at Castle Rock Spires.
Yeah, tell me that story.
Yeah, that was something. Well, yeah, and that's one of the ones I wrote about, doing the silver lining on the fin. And so we had started silver lining, Ron Carson and I had, and then we got up. It's really hard to get up to the fin. You have to go down a trail and then find this ridge and then go up this ridge, and the ridge is filled with high grass that have ticks all over them, poison oak, and rattlesnakes all over the frickin' place. And so you're hiking with these massive packs on up this steep ridge, slipping and sliding. We used to go and get the Tyvek suits from the hardware store so that we could put those on. And then once we got past all the horror show of poison oak and rattlesnakes and ticks, we'd take those off and hang them in a tree and leave them there and go up this gully to this little campsite. We all sit down side by side on this grassy opening in the forest, and we're talking. And then all of a sudden, it's like, da, 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 and then we start moving back and forth like this. We're going all the way over here, all the way over here, da, 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 like that. All this rumbling and trees are like this, and massive earthquake over in Mammoth Lakes. And it was moving the entire Sierra. We're on this gigantic rock formation, and it's moving 4 or 5 inches to the left and 4 or 5 inches to the right as these shock waves come through, you know. It was just mind-boggling. So that finally subsides after, it seems like a minute.
Were there like rock slides and stuff that you were
We
witnessing?
could hear some rocks falling, yeah. We really couldn't see any. There was a lot of forest between us and the rock, but
Wow.
so after this all settles down, Ron looks over at me and he says, God, I'm glad we weren't up there climbing when that happened. And I said, yeah. And then Ron says, what if you had you were climbing and you had your hands in a crack, and that happened and the whole crack just pinched down?
Jeez.
Going, golly, Ron. You know, but he was good at thinking about stuff like that. But so that kind of convinced us that we probably didn't want to go climbing.
Yeah, I mean, everything's unstable at that point.
Yeah. So we ended up working our way down and then going all the way down. We had a car parked right by the Sequoia River below, because initially that was our thought. We'd come in over the top, do our climb, and then go down to a car and then come back around and retrieve the other car, which we did.
Yeah, that's a wild story. It's like part of me is jealous because I would love to experience that, but there's so many variables of like whether you survive it or not that it's like, maybe don't wish that, you know? Yeah, there's a lady who, she's on Instagram. She was on Mount Russell when an earthquake hit the Sierras, like mid climb. Like she has footage of it, or at least towards the end of the earthquake, and the whole escarpment, like the whole Whitney Portal area, is just like smoking with like dust from everything moving. Yeah.
There's so much loose rock up there.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I can't imagine just like having an earthquake go down when you're climbing or when you're on a ridge or it's crazy. It's crazy.
Yeah. Gosh, that really, when you feel that, it's like, God, I am tiny, you know, I am insignificant, that this whole thing can move like that. One time, my buddy Steve and I were hiking up towards University Peak, and sort of similar, but we're walking up the trail. There's a little creek to the left of us coming down, and right out in front of us, this giant block, this is in the springtime, this giant block of granite just goes boom and just blows out of the wall across this creek and almost up to the trail, all kinds of debris and dust and all this stuff. And it was probably only 150 feet ahead of us on the trail.
Wow. And it just no cause, no reason.
No.
Just out of nowhere.
Just crack, and this all blows out. Almost like somebody planted dynamite in it or something.
The booby trap.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wild.
But yeah, another reason that I love the outdoors, I guess, because
The chaos.
yeah, and the randomness and the possibilities of seeing something you could never see anywhere else,
Yeah.
or experience something anywhere else.
And it's so cool. Like moments like that. How long did that last? Like 15 seconds. And how many millennia did it take for that rock to kick off?
Right.
And it's like witnessing things like that that are so rare and that happen so quickly. That's special.
Yeah.
What about you had a close call? Your partner literally saved your life. Tell me that story.
It's another Richard Leversey story.
How did he save you?
So Richard and I, Richard had a plan again, and it was to go and do an FA on this thing that he called the Darth Vader Wall, and that's up on Maggie Mountain in the Sequoia National Forest, up above a little area called Balch Park. So we went up there, and this was on like a Thanksgiving weekend, I think. As a matter of fact, Kelly and this other friend of ours, they brought a turkey and all the fixings up to the campsite for Richard and I to have a Thanksgiving dinner, which I thought was pretty amazing. But then the next day they left, and Richard and I hiked up. It's quite a hike to get to this thing. And the last part of the hike up to the base of it is scrambling on all kinds of loose material and steep stuff with moss all over it and things like that. But we made it up to the base of this thing, and his idea was to climb kind of on the left side of it, and go up to where you could see this very faint line that went across, and it was kind of a final head wall there. And that was up, I think, 4 or 5 pitches. But so we started climbing it up some corners and liebacking, and there wasn't a lot of straight in crack or anything, but and it turned out to be kind of hard 510-ish, 511-ish in places, but we managed to get up the 4 or 5, I can't remember how many pitches, I think probably 4 pitches to this ledge. And so we got to the ledge. The ledge was kind of about as wide as the Thank God ledge on Half Dome.
It's not very big.
About like that, yeah.
Yeah.
So we got up there and we put in an anchor, 2-bolt anchor, and then I clipped into the anchor, and Richard started traversing the ledge out to what he saw. Well, he had seen this little seam from below. Well, it turned out to be like just a tiny seam. I never even got out there to look at it, but he was out there for probably half an hour looking around, and I think he placed a bolt on his way out. And then when he was out there, I said, well, how's it look? What's going on? And he said, oh, man, he says, it's really thin. It's going to be really hard. And I said, like, really hard? He said, yeah, like 513, 514, I don't know. And so I said, oh, well, that's not me. So I won't be able to climb it. And it was getting later in the day too. So we decided to bail from there, and we had, a couple of ropes plus a tag line for a drill. And so we're getting ready to rappel, and we're coiling up ropes, and we're bringing ropes up, and at that time I used to use like a daisy chain to clip in with. And so I had the daisy chain clipped into the anchor. We were messing around with the stuff, you know. I was transferring gear off of my harness. Richard was taking stuff and putting it in we had like a kind of like a little haul bag. It wasn't real big, but we had some gear in that and some food and water, I think. And so we're putting stuff away and getting ready to rappel. Well, somewhere in all of that, moving around, moving this, moving that, changing things, coiling stuff, I unclipped myself from the anchor. I don't even know how I managed to do it. But the daisy chain was still going out from my waist to the anchor. It was like hung up in something. So I really couldn't tell. It wasn't like I unclipped it and it just dropped. And then I would have gone, oh shit, you know. But so after we had moved a few things, I had to lean in for some reason. And I don't even know why I had to lean in, but so after that leaning in maneuver, I was going to lean back on my daisy chain. And I just leaned back and I just kept going. So I'm going over like this, and Richard, who just luckily was looking right at me, he just reached out like that and just grabbed my harness, pulled me back in, and I was at an angle like that.
Oh my gosh.
And Richard was about, I think he was probably 6'1" or 6'2", much bigger, much stronger than me. But God, he reacted so quickly and made that reach for me and got a hold of my harness, didn't lose his grip or miss. And he just pulled me on back in, and he was cussing at me. I don't blame him. And, you know, and mad at me because I scared the crap out of him.
Yeah,
and I scared the crap out of myself. But so then I clipped myself back in and apologized to Richard for being an idiot. And then we finished up and rappelled off. But he saved my life.
Did that, like, I mean, this is kind of like a kitschy question, but like, did that change like you as a climber at all? Like, or is it just one of those things you're like, man, that was close. I just slipped up. I wasn't paying attention.
That incident really hit home, and I was a much more careful, much more thorough climber after that. I double-checked knots. I double-checked, you know, if I was setting up for a rappel, I was slow, methodical, careful, double-checking everything.
Was it one of those things that, like, obviously there's a inverse reaction, so like you immediately become hyper aware, diligent, but then over time, did that fade after you became more comfortable and complacent? Like, because I mean, I'll be honest, like after my injury, and I used to be like just like almost in a stress state, almost just like constantly aware. And now, I mean, I'm not missing things, but like it's much more of a calm thing where I'm not so hyper focused and diligent about it, but I'm able to still, you know, not make mistakes.
Yeah, you're still methodical.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest, there are some times where I like look down and like my locked gate isn't locked. You know, things like little tiny things, and those are good reminders. You're like, all right, dude, you're a little complacent. You missed something.
Let's straighten up here.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think I eventually relaxed about a lot of that, but I'm still thoughtful, and I do double check stuff.
Especially during like critical moments.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like when I'm climbing with somebody else, I don't always say that I'm doing this, but I usually do check their knots. You know, even a very experienced climber, because I just know that it's possible. So many times that was other things like, you know, I'd be going to do a climb on, say, Dome Rock or something, and I'd be with a guy or a girl, and we would be getting ready to go, you know, get our harnesses out and, you know, I'll take the sharp end, you take that end, tie in now, da-da-da-da. And then I'll get distracted during that process and then like be putting the rack on or something, and then I'll look down and I'll realize I haven't finished my figure 8.
Oh, wow.
You know, it's partway through, but I stopped midway through that tie and did something else, you know, help somebody get a pair of shoes or who knows what. And I've only done that a couple times, but I've always kind of gone, well, it's a good thing you're checking, you're looking, you know, because I've known people that have not finished a tie-in and started climbing and maybe got to the first belay and then realized that they weren't even tied in, you know, not really.
Yeah. I've heard stories like that before too.
Yeah.
Yeah, like you think you're on lead and you climb up and you realize you either didn't have the rope in the first place or like it was just like loosely on your harness. It wasn't even finished.
Right. And it's kind of a miracle that it didn't just fall off of your waist halfway up the pitch or something, yeah, which would really be screwy.
I have a weird tick, or not a tick, like just a habit, I guess. You know how like you can hand someone you know how you start a figure 8, you tie the first part of the knot and then you retrace it. Mm-hmm. I'll never use somebody else's first half. Like if someone hands me a rope with like a figure 8 on it,
started the figure 8 for you.
I'll undo it and then retie it.
Yeah.
Because there's like it's start to finish for me. Like I need to pull out the length. I need to tie, like it's all ritualistic, and if I start halfway, it just feels weird.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. You're better off making sure that you do it from start to finish instead of taking somebody else's who started it. Yeah. So, yeah, that experience, it was pretty well embedded in my head from then on to be more careful, to be more diligent about checking things and really verifying that this is actually what it's supposed to be, you know, that kind of stuff. I have another story about climbing with Richard that was another learning experience. And this was early on when I was climbing with Richard, so I hadn't known him for that long. And, you know, he was having me read the books, and he would, like, take me out. Sometimes we'd go out in the yard next to the cabin, and we would practice aid climbing, and I would climb this oak tree, and he would tell me where to put slings and stuff like that. But so early on, he goes, "Hey, man, you want to go help me finish this route that I started?" Yeah, sure. This is down in the Tule Canyon. It's on this thing called Sky Garden Wall. Okay. And at the time, I didn't have a harness, really. I was using webbing and tying a webbing harness. And Richard said, "Oh, I've got this harness you can use to go climb this thing." I said, "Oh, good, you know." So he pulls out this white harness. It's got about a 2-inch waistband. It's got 1-inch leg loops and stuff. The leg loops come out the front, go around the back, and come into a single point piece of webbing that goes down the front. It's like a parachute harness, old parachute harness. So I thought, well, oh, great, thanks. I would love to have a real harness instead of making one all the time, you know. And so we go down to the Tule Canyon, and Richard has invited. Hello, Mateo.
We got a cat.
Yeah, we got a cat. Yeah, you can't go out right now. It's too late for you.
Sorry, bud.
So we go down to the Tule Canyon, and Richard has invited this reporter from a local little community newspaper. And he shows up there, and we meet him, and we do this hike up to the base of this climb. That wall is about 700 feet from top to bottom. And if you look at it, you would probably go, that looks like a munge pile, you know, it looks like crap. Because it's got a lot of lichen and stuff on it, a lot of bushes, a lot of cactus growing out of cracks on it. But Richard found this one line, and he had started it a year before, and he had a rope hanging off the first pitch. Well, the rope was almost white from having sat there in the sun all day, every day for a year. And so he gets out Jumars, and he's going to Jumar the rope. He's tied in. I'm going to belay him, and he's going to place pro.
Oh, on the way up.
On the way up.
Mm.
So in case the rope breaks.
Yeah.
So he does that and goes all the way to the top of the rope where it's anchored. And then he yells down, rope, rope, rope. And he throws that thing off. And it was so amazing because you know how ropes will come down and they just like this?
Yeah.
This thing came down like that, like brittle, straight lines, and kind of folded in on itself like a folding ruler or something.
Wow, yeah.
All over the place. And so then I'm tied in already, and he starts belaying me, and we climb that first pitch. And then I think he led the next pitch also. And then he asked me if I wanted to lead a pitch, or would I lead the next pitch? And I said, yeah, okay. So I'm leading the third pitch, and I get up to this area where the crack's kind of wide and awkward, and it splits in two directions, and there's this big slabby thing in between where the two cracks go. So I decide to take the left crack because that seems to be leading up and around this thing and then to more cracks. But there's all kinds of dirt and little bushes in the cracks. So all the time that we're on these cracks, we're cleaning stuff and we're pulling bushes out, and the cactus we have to get out by, like taking out a piton and digging out from underneath it and then trying to flip it out of our way, and all this stuff, and we're filthy. And so I get off on this left crack, and I place a piece at the bottom where the two cracks intersect below this kind of slabby thing. I get out on this crack, and it's kind of slippery, the face everywhere. And I'm trying to clean out a place where I can get a jam in, and I lose it, and I fall, and I'm tumbling down this filthy face next to the crack. And then Richard's taking in the slack as fast as he can. And I come to the end of the rope, and wham! This harness, which has a strap coming up the middle.
Oh my God.
Forces my testicle up into my abdomen. I am now going, oh my God, Richard, let me down, 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 let me down. And he is trying to let me down as fast as he can. It's like that 15 or 20 feet to get down to Richard and that ledge. It was like a nightmare. I know I've got a testicle stuck inside me, and it hurts like heck. And so I get down there to the ledge, and he's still got a hold of the rope. And you know how the rope's tight when you've been lowered down, and I'm going, slack, 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 slack. So he gives me some slack. I pull the rope down, and I take the harness, and I'm kind of pulling on it, pulling it down, trying to get it away from my body. And then all I could do is go like that. And it seems like it takes about 3 minutes. It probably was only about 3 seconds, but it's like, oh. You couldn't really hear it, but I could feel it go
Oh
out
my
of me,
gosh.
and it's like, ah. And oh God, I swear every bit of blood went out of my whole upper body, I think. It was like, and I was sweating profusely, and I started to feel kind of faint. And Richard's going, "What's happening? What's going on? What's happening?" I said, "Testicle is inside me." And he goes, "Oh my God, it's that stupid Willen sit harness." I go, "Yeah." So I got my composure back, and then he goes, "You still want to do this?" And I said, "Yeah, I'll go ahead and do it. I think I know what to do now." And so I pulled the harness down away from my body as much as I could. Not that that was going to do any good if I fell again, but and then I went back up, and I went right past the point that I had fallen, and got up and set up a belay and everything. And then we ended up finishing this route, all right to the top, And we were both, in those days, it was popular to wear white painter's pants and striped pirate shirts and things like that. And like Richard, we both had white painter pants on. Well, they were almost black by the time we got to the top of this thing. And shirts ripped and torn from catching on cactus spines and things like that. We ended up naming the route the Silver Sword Route because there's all these, they're like, kind of like yucca cactus on the way up that. And so it was getting late in the day, and then we had to rappel off. So we started rappelling, and as we were rappelling, it got dark. And so Richard had these surplus Forest Service issue headlamps, a couple of D-cell batteries in a little pack, a wire that went up to a headband, and a crummy little single bulb light thing. Well, so he got those out of the pack, and he put his on, I put mine on, and we had rappelled, I think maybe 2 rappels, and by that time, both lamps went out, and it was dark. So we had to make what we thought would be at least 2 more rappels to get to the bottom. So Richard rappelled down, and he disappears into the dark. And I'm on this little ledge, and he's going, "Oh man, I'm coming to the end of the rope. I don't know if there's going to be anything here to get off on." And this is the way he used to talk all the time when he was sketchy on climbs. And it's like, oh my God, it looks bad, it looks really bad. And he goes, "I'm coming down. I don't know, I might have to rappel, or I might rappel right off the end of the rope. I don't know what's going to happen." And then it's like, "Oh shit." And I said, "What?" And he goes, "I got a ledge." And I go, "Oh, great." So he goes, "Oh, let me set up an anchor, and then you can come down." So he sets up the anchor. I come down to this ledge, and his anchor is a number 7 stopper in a rock flake that is wedged into the back of the ledge. That's his anchor.
Just one nut?
One nut. The little rock is split open like this, and he's got it down in there to the lowest point that he can get it. And he's sitting on the ledge with that thing attached to his waist harness. And I go, "This is it?" And he goes, "It's all we got." And we're on a ledge. We're still like 160 feet from the bottom, but we can't really tell. So I sit down next to Richard. We pull the ropes down, and then we fix up the next rappel on the cord of that number 7 stopper. It's just running through that cord.
Running through the
8mm cord. Yeah. And so I'm sitting there attached to that. He's attached to it. And then he says, "Maybe I should go first. That way if the anchor blows out, you won't die." And I'm thinking, yeah, but the ropes will be gone, you'll be gone, everything will be gone, and I'm just be sitting here. And because he was heavier and bigger than me, so he thought that'd be a good way to test the anchor. He shinnies off the ledge after he's set up to rappel. He shinnies off the ledge, kind of turns around, and down he goes into the dark. And then he goes, "I think I can see the ground. I think I can see it. I'm coming down. It's getting closer. I'm getting closer." And he goes, "Ah!" Boom. And he goes, "Shit, I went off the end of the rope." I said, "How far?" And he goes, "Oh, like 8 feet. He would always get really excited about something and then go, "Oh, no, that's no problem." Or "I'm okay." Something like that. But so then he goes, "When you come down," he says, "you need to remember which side of the anchor the knot's on." And so I'm looking at that in the dark, and I'm kind of feeling around and going, make sure, okay, it's on the right side. It's on the right side. It's on the right side. So I rappel down. I get down to the end of the rope. I've got the very ends of the rope right here. And Richard looks like he's about 35 or 40 feet away. And I go, "This is not 10 feet, Richard. It's like 30 feet. He goes, No. He says, "I walked downhill a little bit." "You're all right." It's only like 6 or 8 feet. And so I go, "Oh, are you sure?" And he goes, "Yeah, just take your time, get off the ends of the rope, get down to the end of the rope with your hands, and then let go." And he didn't say let go. He said, "And make sure you're hanging on to that rope that has the strand that's going to get the ropes down." So I go, okay, so I'd never done anything like this before. So I get off the ends of the rope. I'm still hanging on to both of them. I get my hand around that one rope, and it's like, don't let go. And then I just dropped and brought the rope with me, and it came down, and everything came down, and
ended up being 8 feet.
It was about 8 feet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I don't think I even fell down when I hit the ground or anything, even though it was kind of sloping. But then we pulled all the ropes down, and then we worked our way down to our car in the dark. And that was about half a mile down through brush and all this stuff. And we finally made it to the car and went home. But it was always adventure with him.
What does that word mean to you?
Adventure?
Yeah.
Getting into the unknown, trying something, having an idea of what you want to do, but really not knowing if you're going to be successful. And just going into the unknown, all the properties of that unknown venture that you're on. What are you going to run into? What problem are you going to have to solve?
Not only is the outcome unknown, but the problems to get there are unknown as well.
Mm-hmm. And, that was something I was really grateful for, getting to, knowing Richard and having those experiences too, because it sort of boosted my confidence in a pretty quick succession, of things.
To have someone you could trust to just be there to handle the unknown with.
Yeah.
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 It's hard to find someone like that. And like, so, we've talked about Richard a lot in this podcast. Like, I think a lot of people struggle with, there are many people I've spoken with that struggle with climbing partnerships. Like, I guess we just, identified a characteristic of a good partnership, someone who you can trust to handle, raw and like unknown situations with. Like, what else, like what other characteristics of a partnership do you find like is something that's valuable?
I think that probably the trust that you join up with somebody, you learn about them, they learn about you, and you even learn about their weaknesses and their strengths, and you learn about your weaknesses and your strengths, and you learn to rely on each other and trust one another. And that's, that kind of stuff, you can't buy it. You can't, the only way you can have anything like that with another person is just by going out and working with them and experiencing with them and learning about them. And even learning about what their fears are, and them learning about what your fears are. And still wanting to, hang with them and experience things with them.
Yeah, I think one of the things I've found is like you need someone that part of this trust is like being with someone that you know to your core that has your best interest in mind. And I think that you can tell when you're climbing with somebody and it's not there. Like, it's their experience first. It's their mission first. It's the reason why they're there is for these personal reasons. And it's like your safety is not really like a priority, or your experience isn't like a priority. It's like the partnership's experience isn't a priority. I think that I've experienced that, and yeah, it's such a different experience when you just know that like you're invested in that person's experience and their safety, and it's like to your core, you're like, I'm like looking out for you, and that person's doing that for you as well. Because you're going to miss stuff, and it's important for your other partner to catch what you miss and for you to catch what they miss. Like, as a team together, when you are both focused on safety of each other, you're going to go so much further than if you're only focused on like what you're doing. And, you might miss something that your partner didn't do, or like even when my partners lead, like if we see like, if like a carabiner's clipped the wrong way, you're like, hey man, I think it should go the other way. Just a quick little reminder. Or like, hey, like, I don't know, that piece didn't look that good from down here or something like that. Just like, not necessarily telling them how to climb, just like, it's like, hey, I'm watching you, and I noticed something, take it or leave it. But it's that communication of just, man, I'm with you, I'm watching you.
Right. And, the idea that if you see something amiss that they've done, and you say, hey, that carabiner's got an open gate on it, or it's jammed up against a piece of sling or whatever, they don't get offended and act like you're being critical of them, because they trust you. They know that you're not you don't look at them that way. You're not looking for mistakes. And you trust them because you're not afraid to point that out. And that's another really big thing I think about climbing that is a wonderful thing, you know. I have met people and climbed with some people that you can tell that they're a little bit competitive. They're maybe trying to outdo you or make it into a competition in a way where, oh, I can make moves faster and better than you, or I can climb this and you more easily and more smoothly than you can, or, you know, and they'll kind of let you know that they're competing with you to do better than you. And my experiences climbing with people like that have been pretty short-lived because I never wanted to compete with people. I wanted to learn from people. I wanted to be inspired by people and maybe even pushed to do better, but I didn't want to compete with them.
Was that always the case? Because I remember in our meet and greet you had mentioned where there was a stint where you experienced rivalry. Was that something you outgrew?
Yeah, I think I did. That period of my climbing where I had the rivalries, those things kind of were brought on by, well, for example, one of my climbing partners, a longtime climbing partner, he was very competitive about doing first ascents. And he kind of tried to keep places a secret. Like if he had a crag that he started developing, he would want to keep it a secret. And like I wasn't competitive, and I would just blather about things. And a lot of times I'd say, "Oh yeah, we've been climbing here, and there's some really good route possibilities. You know, you ought to come check it out." And I would literally invite people to come to go climb a new route at a place that we had been climbing together, you know, and then he would say, "Hey man, don't do that. Let's keep it to ourselves," you know, that kind of stuff. And so I sort of had a little rivalry with him in the sense of just that I wanted to share and be open, and he didn't. And then another one was another climbing partner that I had who he started going back to routes that were put up by us or other people, and he would enhance them. Say it was a multi-pitch route where all the belays were gear belays. He would go back on some of these routes and put in bolts at the belays. And I just thought, that's crap, you know.
On routes that weren't his.
On some that weren't his and some that were ours.
Okay.
You know,
without consoling with you first or
right.
asking your opinion, yeah.
Yeah. And then also there were some routes where, like, you know, he was a solid 5'10" climber, but there were some routes that were maybe a little above his limit as far as leading. He could follow them probably, and so he would get younger, more, you know, rope gun kind of people, and have them lead, and he'd bring a drill with him and follow, and then add bolts.
So he'd be putting bolts on routes he couldn't even climb.
Right, that it weren't really safe for him to climb. He probably would take a lot of falls. So, that really angered me that he was doing that. I just felt like that was totally unethical. But I got over it. If people believe in different things, no reason to be angry at them. No reason to take what was otherwise a great relationship and throw it to the side because you disagree about what to do about certain things, Certainly he was never going to retro bolt every climb in the Sierra anyway. He just couldn't, so.
Yeah, it is interesting how that whole introduction of bolting and sport climbing segregated so many people, and there were so many like partnerships that fell apart, and like rivalries and like chopping, and it was like such a heated time.
Yeah, that went on in Joshua Tree a lot.
A lot in Joshua Tree.
Yeah.
I think, what did you say? You have a quote here. It was like, there are two things that people fear the most. It's change and public speaking. And I think that's like, it's just a symptom of that, right? It's like nowadays, it's like there are still traces of that kind of like battle of ethics happening, but it's much less heated than it used to be, at least to my knowledge. And I think it's just time, right? It's like sport climbing is so normalized now, and I think it has a place. It's like if people want to just try really hard and focus on technical movement and nothing else, I mean, what a great place to do that. But yeah, it's like, but it doesn't mean you need to strip climbing of its risk and put bolts everywhere. It's like let people be bold where they want to be bold. And or you said, another quote you said here that was really good. Routes should demand something of you. If you're not ready, don't get on it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's true too. Like we talked about this a little bit with the element of risk. It's like there needs to be consequences for your actions.
Yeah.
You need to think about what you're going to do. Are you ready?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, at this point in time, there are hundreds of thousands of routes to choose from. And why would you pick out a route and say, that's not bolted well enough for me, and I want to climb it? So I'm going to wrap down and I'm going to add a bunch of bolts to it, and then I can climb it safely. It's like, okay.
I think they do it in like a service to the community, less about like, oh, well, then I can do it. It's like, well, then everybody can do it, and it's like, well, I don't know. Yeah, it's a tough one. I'm not sure how to navigate that one, especially if the first accessionist says like, sure. Then it's like, then you have different like posses that are just like, well, don't do it. And they're like, do it. And it's like, well, who gets to decide? So it's a tough one.
It's in a way that's kind of like an artist saying, yeah, I've had that painting, that painting is so nice. I've had it in the Met.
Yeah. Someone wants to add a yellow streak to it or something.
If you want to add some paint to it and change it a little bit, maybe some more vibrant color on the right side of it or whatever, yeah, go ahead. It's like, you can't imagine an artist ever saying anything like that.
No, that's true. But then you also have the people who have been obsessed with your art or that piece of art for so much time. Yeah. And if you were to change it, it's just as, hard for them to accept that, even if the artist, it's like you can get so attached to something not even being your creation or it means so much to you. I think that's where we're just we're struggling there.
Yeah. And it is a struggle. I was not too keen on sport climbing when it first came about, and I wasn't too keen on rappel bolting, that kind of stuff, because at the time I started climbing, the ethic was, ground up, and you only use bolts at a minimum when you have to. But otherwise, you try to go as far as you can safely without placing bolts, and then if you get to a tough spot, okay, now it's time to place a bolt, which is why so many old or trad routes are so run out, but that's what I learned That's another thing I learned from leprosy, you know, and learned from knowing about Yosemite climbing and what was happening with Bridwell and people like that, you know, and then even at the Needles, like Mike Leklinsky came there and did a lot of new routes, and he was pretty sparing with bolts. Oh, kitty cat.
He's inspired by the climbing.
He is inspired by climbing. And yeah, there he is, lording over us. So Leklinsky and this other fellow, which I'm ashamed to say I can't remember his name, and he has passed away, but they were putting up some, as Leklinsky would have said, some pretty sporty routes. And on the west face of the Magician, as you're approaching the trail, you know, you're coming down the trail to the formations, there's this huge expanse of steep rock with all these big water streaks coming down. It's pretty much straight up and down. And if you get closer to it, you will find that there are a lot of edges and platelets and stuff you can climb on, but it's still steep as all get out. And Leklinsky was such a good climber, and his partners, I mean, they did some amazing stuff. Well, he put up, I think, 3 routes on that wall, and all of them pretty much only have, it's face climbing. They probably only have 2 or 3 bolts per pitch.
Yeah, that's crazy.
For pro.
Yeah.
So if you fall off before you clip the next bolt, you're going to take a whipper, you know. But those guys they could climb at that level, and I would have liked it if I could climb at that level, but I never had the time or the energy or the understanding to ever get that good. But I have thought about that so many times. Like, wouldn't it be nice if Leklinsky went back and bolted it and made it a little safer for other people? But then there's that part of me that says, no, that's the way he did it. And there are climbers out there who can climb that just as well as he did with the same amount of protection. And so that route is reserved for those people. And I don't have to go and climb those routes because they're too hard for me. They're too scary. And there are plenty of other things to do.
Exactly. It's not like that's the one route, you know. I think the only thing I think some people argue against is if like you're at like a crag, like a big crag with a bunch of routes, and there's one route on the wall that's like out of character and just like super run out, or like, you know, X-rated or something like that. Then there's argument, well, like the crag should be kind of like unified in its style, and like, you know, it's all this left and right and all these things. But I think like the example you brought up is great, and it reminds me of the backer you're in. It's like there are psychological tests pieces that exist, and that they should stay that way. They're not everywhere. It's not like a plague where like all the routes are run out. It's like there are far and few between, and if you are skilled enough to do that, it's bragging rights. It's a statement for what kind of climber you are. It's a statement of your skill set. And I think that's a badge of honor that should still exist if you're able to do that.
Yeah, I agree. You know, I did a route right next to the Backer Yarian, to the right of it.
Peace?
Huh?
Did you climb Peace?
It might be Peace. I don't know.
It's like
I don't
a
even know the name of it.
513C.
Oh, no. I've never climbed that hard. The hardest moves I've ever made are a move or two of 512 here and there. But it's, I think it was rated 10C maybe, or 10D. I'm not sure. But it's on the same wall. It's pretty close to Backer Yarian, and it's got a lot of the same characteristics, you know. And I was happy to do that. And it was really cool. And it was like, for me, it was like, oh, was almost like doing the Bakeriarian, you know, same environment, same kind of character, and but a little better protected, and good for me, you know. So, and that's the kind of thing too, is, you know, if there's some route that you see and you want to do, but you're mad because they didn't protect it very well. It's a face climb and it's all bolts, all two or three of them, and it's like, okay, well, somewhere in the world there is a climb that is very similar to it, that's better protected. Why not go do that one?
I think ultimately it's just you're mad at yourself because you can't climb it.
Maybe so. Yeah.
It's externalization of your own
Right.
self-loathing.
That your psychology won't allow you to
Therefore, somehow it's wrong that it exists.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I think there possibly is that sort of element of jealousy. And anyway, but you know, that kind of stuff will go on forever, I guess.
Forever, yeah. Very subjective. All right, so you know, kind of bringing us to the end here, I'm curious, you know, you're circling back, I guess, you're 78 as you sit in this chair today, right? Mm-hmm. How have you seen age affect your climbing as your age has progressed? Like, as someone in my shoes or younger generation who is looking forward to our elder years, what can we expect for how our body responds to age and climbing?
Well, I think a lot of it depends on your body, what kind of body you have, because, for example, you know, I got to climb with Becky a few times. I think the first time that I climbed with him, he was maybe a little older than I am right now, like 79, maybe 80. And he looked like an old person. He was deaf as a post. Didn't wear hearing aids. Probably couldn't afford them. But he could hike and he could climb. He just couldn't climb hard anymore, you know. And so we would go and do routes that were possible for him, you know. God, he got mad at me a couple times too. Oh, I took him on the tree route. He wanted to go do the tree route on Dome Rock. And the second pitch of the tree route is this parallel-sided crack. It's about maybe 1.25 inches wide all the way. And Dumbo here had climbed the tree route by that time, I don't know, 150 times, soloed it up and down many times. And so when I would do the tree route, I would just take a little rack of stuff, you know, a few wires, a couple of small wires, a couple of like 1-inch pieces, a couple of smaller cams, and a couple of bigger cams for belays and different things. But generally on climbing the pitches, I didn't protect much at all. So I do the first pitch of the tree route, bring Becky up, and he says, "Oh, I want to lead this next pitch." And when we were at home at my house in Porterville, he had come over and he told me what he wanted to do the next day. So then we went up there. So, but when we were leaving to go climb, he reaches into the back of his Subaru and he holds up this rack of gear. It's about 12 pieces. And he says, "Will this work?" And I said, "Yeah, that will." Because that's the kind of rack I used when I climbed the tree route, because I'd climbed it 18 billion times, you know, and not even thinking about poor Becky. So we get on that top of that first pitch, and he's got his little rack with him, collected it from me. I used it to climb the first pitch. And then he looks at that crack, and he he's going to try and place a piece right above the belay, just to clip into, and he's trying to fit a piece in there. Everything he's got is too small or too big. And he gets pissed. He's like, "Hey, this fucking granite. Yeah, this. I don't have the right rack. I don't have the gear. You told me this rack would work." I go, "Oh man, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't think. I wasn't thinking." And he goes, "God damn it!" He's like, you better lead this." So I led that. I just ended up leading the rest of the climb. But he did come back and climb with me again, though, which was nice. He forgave me, I guess. But I forgot what we were talking about now.
Age.
My age.
Yep.
Yeah. But the funny thing about Becky was I have a picture of him on Dome Rock, and like when he would walk down the trail, you know how older people they start to get hunched over, right, and their posture. Well, he was kind of hunched forward on the trail, and then when he got on the rock, though, the angle of Dome Rock, his hunched over is perfect. He looks perfectly natural that way. And so, but he aged well, I think, having lived into his 90s and climbed all that time. But me, on the other hand, being an older climber, I have a lot of sort of mitigating circumstances. I have arthritis, and I have it in my joints and in my back. I inherited my mother's bones. My mother had all these things I'm going to list off. Deteriorating discs. I've had herniated discs. I still have a couple in my back. Scoliosis and disc degeneration. There are a couple of discs in my back that have just disappeared. They just evaporated. So for years I have had back problems, they haven't prevented me from climbing too much, except when I've had to have back surgeries for my herniated discs and stuff.
You have any fusions?
No fusions, which I really was glad about that, because a lot of those go bad. Apparently you get fused discs, and then that puts a lot more pressure on the bones above and below whatever the fusion is, and those joints eventually go bad too. But I've had 2 knee replacements.
It's like one on each, or 2
Yes.
for each? Okay.
One there, one there. So that has done 2 things for me. It's limited my range of motion with my legs. I can't high step like I used to. God, I have a picture of myself on Dome Rock on the first ascent of Welcome to Dome Rock, and I'm high stepping like, I swear to God, my knee is up here. There's no way I could get my knee up that high anymore. So there's that. I had a joint issue with this thumb and had that operated on, had 2 bones fused, and I've got a plate in there. And I kind of overcame that, because the doctor that did that said, you probably won't be able to flatten out your hand after I do this. And so I became defiant, and yes, I can flatten out my hand. But, I guess a lot of people don't do their physical therapy or things like that. So, but, and then, so I'm suffering from a lot of things that happen to older people, developing arthritis, stuff like that. Less flexibility, I have to I should be stretching every day, but I'm too lazy to do that, but I should. And I don't lead climb anymore because of the knees. If I take a fall lead climbing, I'll probably, if I crack that knee, it's serious business. I might just lose the my bottom part of my leg, you know. And just other things about getting old, my eyesight, you know, things like that, and flexibility and strength, all those things.
How do you seem like a positive human, someone who is chipper and generally, you know, in a positive mood. How have you maintained / worked on like mental health as these kind of harder things in life have come your way?
I'm not really sure. I have gone through periods of my life when I was extremely negative and extremely sarcastic and bitter kind of things. I went through about a 2-year period of time when I was absolutely scared out of my mind to climb. I don't really know why. But I obviously it was probably psychological, and I just kept working on getting over it. And finally, after a couple of years, I talked myself out of being afraid by being more positive and reminding myself, hey, you've done these moves before without falling. You have fallen many times before, and you've not been hurt. Your pro's been good, you know. So get over yourself, man. Start thinking about this in a more positive way. You know, not come to the crag and be entertaining ideas of disaster every time you get here. You know? And I think also my wife has really been a big influence on me as far as positivity. When I was teaching and stuff and really unhappy about that, I was pretty negative. And she would just go, get over it. Get the fuck over it, you know. Stop it. Stop being so negative. And but when I've tried in my life to solve problems about me, my own problems, I have become more meditative and more introspective. You know, like I was telling you that I was really into a lot of bad things when I was younger and before I started climbing. And when I was not long after I started climbing and moved up to the mountains and met Richard Leversey and so on, I was still kind of negative and a little depressed about my existence, you know. And I started really thinking about it, and I realized that I was blaming my parents and my upbringing for a lot of the way that I was, and what you talked about, creating self-limiting beliefs. And I would spend every evening after work in my little cabin up at Ponderosa, all by myself, just sitting and thinking about my day, about my week, about my month, about my year, about what was happening and why, and realizing that I had created myself out of reaction to my parents and my upbringing. My parents were functional alcoholics. They argued and fought a lot of times. One time my dad announced to me that he and my mom were getting a divorce, which they never did. My mom was consigned to mental institutions a couple times. My mother tried to commit suicide a couple times when I was growing up. And I had a pretty poor self-image. And I just thought about all of that, and I came to this realization that if I don't forgive my parents and stop blaming them for all of my negative things and all of my negative ways and my resentments, if I don't stop that, I'm just going to go to some point where I'll just be a homeless dumpster diver or something, you know, and that it wasn't really fair for me to do that. I had to admit, my parents did the best job that they could. They had with the tools that they had to be parents, and they were people who suffered the same kinds of insecurities or doubts or anger or things that everybody else does, you know, and that it wasn't their fault for the way I felt. That it was just kind of I think, a way for me to excuse myself for being the way I was. So, and when I got to that point, I started opening up and coming out, and you know, I had already kind of learned that lesson about goal setting and stuff, and so then I said, okay, well, you can really put that into action, and you know, do your first ascents and work on becoming a better carpenter, builder, you know, and maybe someday get married again and own a home and have a family and be a functional human being, you know, and be happy. And so that's what I proceeded to do.
It's awesome. It's beautiful. I'm glad you were able to recognize that.
Yeah.
It's an interesting thing. I've been thinking about like the phrase, like, you can't let your past define you.
Mm-hmm.
But in a way it does, regardless of whether you want it to.
Right.
You have to, it's like a balance between accepting where you came from and just being honest with yourself that that was the reality, but at the same time not using it as an excuse for your shortcomings.
Right.
Like there's that weird dance that you have to do.
Yeah.
You can't ignore it, but you can't like use it
Right.
to your detriment.
Yeah, you can't let that be the definition of who you are, because you have the power to define yourself. It's just we don't all know that, you know. We have to figure it out.
And climbing was the tool for that.
It was. That was the key.
Yeah, it's really cool. Just kind of a closing question. What do you want the next generation of climbers to understand as we progress further into this world of technology and AI and safer climbing and, you know, all of these things? Like, it could be climbing related, it doesn't have to be. What do you think is a valuable piece of information that people can walk away with?
I guess, I don't know if this sounds a little weird, but that climbing, as you put it, can empower you, but not just empower you to be a better climber, you know, or a better athlete, but it can empower you to work on other things and maybe make some change in the world, or help the world be a better place, or just be a contributor in your community to make things better, or to help people, or to improve the community, that's one of the big things you can learn from climbing, is that it's giving you tools to do other things.
Yeah, kind of like what we talked about earlier, is so many lessons and things about yourself that you learn that you can apply it then to almost every aspect of your life.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's really cool.
Yeah.
Well, awesome. I appreciate you sitting down with me and chatting and spending this time and letting us completely redesign your nice, beautiful house here. I promise we'll put it back together.
Oh, good. I wasn't looking forward to that.
Yeah, we'll just pack up and leave. Bye. Good luck.
Yeah. Thanks a lot. See ya.
Where can people follow your story? Is there any sort of book or website or Instagram that people can learn more about you?
So, well, I have 3 climbing stories that were published, and I've told you about them already.
I have the book.
Yeah, in that book, Legacy of Adventure Climbing in the Sierra, compiled by E.C. Joe, and that's available on Amazon. So
I'll put the links in the show notes.
And I have a Facebook page, but frankly, I don't post much. So, and sometimes when I do post things on my page, people get mad at me because they're sort of political, but which I actually don't think you should really do on Facebook, but I can't help myself. But I haven't posted a lot on there. But that's about it. Yeah. Or they can always message me through Facebook if they want and tell me what they think.
Yeah, that's an invitation, everybody.
Yeah.
Go for it. Awesome. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you. I thought I was going to be nervous about this, but it was pretty pleasant.
Good. I'm glad.
Way to keep me talking.
That's my job.